5 years ago, there was no far right at all.
Extreme right populists did not have the earthquake they expected. Politics is full of mistakes.
Voters in the European Parliament elections have shaken up the continent's politics, turning away from the major power blocs that have dominated Brussels in recent years and boosting the smaller groupings, the Greens, the Liberals and the far right. My guest this week here in Stockholm is the two-term MEP Anna Maria Corazza Bildt, who sat until recently under the banner of the European People's Party. What did she and the party do wrong? Anna Maria Corazza Bildt, welcome to Conflict Zone.
Thank you, Tim.
Apparently European voters weren't so keen on the status quo anymore. Do you accept a share of the blame for that?
For the first, voter participation has been very, very high historically. 51% more or less in medium in all of Europe.
But they don't like the status quo. They came out to say that.
But this gives democratic legitimacy to European institutions, shows that people start to understand how relevant the European Union is and that it really affects their daily life and their future. They want more accountability, they want more transparency. I think they will ask much more participation for whoever is going to run Europe in the future.
That's a nice way of spinning it, isn't it? But the fact is that the party you sat with, the European People's Party,
is still the biggest.
Well, it helped create this growing wave of Europeans who say we don't want the status quo. Status quo doesn't work.
Extreme right populists did not have the earthquake they expected. They have been actually having an earthquake of scandals. And the liberal conservative forces are stronger than previously. The Greens advanced, the Socialists collapsed, the extreme left lost almost 50 seats.
5 years ago there was no far right at all, was there? So you held the door open for them during the last 5 years.
I think this is not the time for blame gaming. This is the time to see...
It's time for the truth, isn't it? Time to look at what happened, the achievements of the last 5 years.
I think what people want to know, they want to have politicians that take responsibility, build a stable majority to run Europe in a way that it responds to their problems, reconnects with them, and gives answer to security, migration, but also free trade, economy, jobs, and they don't want to be left behind.
The answers that the last 5 years didn't give, because the story of the last 5 years for the EU has been one of missed warnings, hasn't it? Warnings about growing inequality, warnings about climate change, fears about identity and culture, these kinds of things which weren't properly addressed in the last 5 years. Hence the door was let open for the far right, which didn't really exist 5 years ago, did it?
Well, the far right in Europe has unfortunately always existed. These extremes always existed.
Yeah, but it wasn't winning elections 5 years ago,
so it's not a new phenomenon.
It wasn't winning elections 5 years ago, was it?
Well, we have in Austria, the extreme right party has collapsed, left the government, and they lose very strong.
For the moment.
In Spain they lost, in Portugal they lost, in Denmark they lost. They won very strong in Italy, and you have a strong point there.
And Belgium.
Italians feel left behind, genuinely, in migration. And he has been stirring emotions and fears, like that's what populists do, but not giving any answer.
But there were so many
not
warnings
giving any solution.
that were ignored, weren't there? On migration, for instance, in 2016, the head of the refugee centre at Oxford warned of an elephant in the room, he said, that no one was prepared to acknowledge. It was the fact that the great fear among Europeans was the fear of Islam. And that, he claimed, created a vacuum which the anti-immigrant parties hurried to fill, and filled with a certain amount of success, didn't they?
Without giving any answer, because they are putting people against people. They are scaring people with propaganda against Islam, against Muslim, even against other Europeans. But so far, they have not given any solution on migration. The reality, Tim, is that we have...
And nor has the EU.
Because the problems have been changing. We are not responsible for the war in Syria or in Iraq, or what happens in part of the demographic boom in Africa, poverty, underdevelopment. There are 68 million, more or less, people on the move now in the world. You cannot blame all of the European Union for that.
I don't, but the whole point of the European Union was to find common solutions to common problems.
And we did.
That you didn't do.
And you know.
And that you didn't
And you know
do.
who blocked that, Tim? The Orbans. The extreme right politicians who went close to power, who are sitting governments, are the ones who are blocking the entire asylum package and migration package that the European Parliament majority has voted, including the reform of the Dublin regulation. I was there for 10 years to do those laws. By politicians like Orban, who say, not only we don't like it, we don't even want to negotiate it. So going against the whole way European politics is done. So nationalist populists are already
So what
destroying
did the EU do?
the
What
European...
did the EU do? It
But they are the
outsourced the problem.
They
first
are
to
the
Turkey.
EU.
Yes, first to Turkey
The
and
Council
then to
is
the
the EU as well.
First to Turkey and then to Libya, didn't it? And
Well,
neither of those
we
worked
need
out
to
particularly gloriously, did they?
We need to work with our external partners, of course.
So it's okay in Libya where they can be incarcerated for years.
No.
The migrants are beaten up.
That's not what I said.
Sexually abused. That's okay.
That's not what I said. I was
You
in
said
Niger.
work with external partners.
We have to work with external partners, of
But
course.
these are clearly the wrong ones then. Aren't
We
they?
are working-
Libya is the wrong partner for you.
We are working to stabilize Libya according to a United Nations plan to have a stable government there, be able to have elections. The situation now is of civil war.
But look at what's happening to the people in those camps as you work to stabilize the situation. It could take years to stabilize the situation.
Tim, I have been one of those denouncing, more than others, the human rights situation in Libya as unacceptable. I went to Agadez, I went to Niger. I have been one, and my political group, promoting a Marshall Plan for Africa to make sure that we really solve the problems there, we invest there, and we make sure that people can live in
This could
dignity
take
there.
decades, couldn't it? The problem is now. You look at the deal with Turkey, which has had a spin-off effect in Greece, hasn't
This
it?
is extreme right rhetoric. There are no quick fixer, Tim. And the idea
There
that
are wrong
Euro,
fixes, though, aren't
Euro
there?
could
There are
be
wrong
a quick
fixes.
fixer. It's long-term problems that are in the stronger, united and open Europe, not a divided and destroyed and broken Europe. It's problems that are over borders and need common solutions, and the populists are doing exactly the opposite.
Anna Maria
We
Corazza,
want a
Bildt,
legal, safe, orderly migration.
My point is
They
you
want to
made the
raise
deals.
walls
You
and-
made the deals with the wrong people, the wrong deals with the wrong people. You take the deal to return irregular migrants, the one with Turkey, for instance. Now it's apparently come out that it has led to knock-on dismal policies and practices in Greece that are said by NGOs to be short-sighted, ineffective and dangerous. You've got as many as 20,000 people who've been left stranded in these camps, these so-called hot centres. These terrible conditions, they said, are due to the European policy of trapping asylum seekers in EU hotspots. It's down to the EU. Wrong deals for the wrong people.
Did you visit this?
Did I need to?
Yes, of course.
I saw the reports.
Well, I visited them.
So you've got nothing to be proud of here,
I visited.
have you?
Are you only asking, can I also answer? Because if you give me a chance to answer, I visited Lesbos and the camps, both in the islands and the reception centers, and the situation in Greece is bad. It is due to the fact that a communist government in Greece could not put up the institutions that are necessary, since we don't have a federation in Europe, to work with European Union institutions which are strong, which give enormous support to Greece, and which are really doing a lot in Greece, from Europol to the Fundamental Rights Agency to Frontex to the Asylum Office. Greece has a lot, the Refugee Fund, Greece has a lot of help from the European Union, but it takes two to tango, and it's not easy. I have been the one denouncing the situation when accompanying minors there. There is not sufficient capacity in Greece for that, and there are not enough
Which was
member
known beforehand.
states,
Which was known
and there
beforehand.
are not enough member states in the European Union who are willing to do relocation, which means to live up with their agreement to relocate from both Italy and Greece. So there's a lack of solidarity among member states. Don't blame it on Brussels. With Turkey, it's impossible to deal with a solution for migration and asylum without working with Turkey. Like you, Erdogan, you don't like Erdogan. They are in Turkey.
What you can blame the EU for is that it has moved to the right itself, hasn't it? Trying to beat the populists at their own game. At an EU summit in 2018, the leaders called for so-called regional disembarkation platforms. Basically a place where migrants who got fished out of the Mediterranean could be parked while someone tried to work out what to do with them. And the EU mantra became, if we don't get tough, others will get tougher. You remember, excuse me, Donald Tusk at the EU summit. Some may think I'm too tough in my proposals on migration, but trust me, if we don't agree on them, then you will see some really tough proposals from some really tough guys. So you shifted to the right. The EU shifted to the right.
You're talking to me like I'm the spokesperson of the European Union. I'm not.
I'm not talking to you, but you are part of the European People's Party that went along with these things.
We stand up for fundamental rights, for human rights. We want a humane, rule-based, common European asylum and migration policy. Some member states don't want it. And the European Union is done about coalitions and compromise. The European People's Party did not have majority during last mandate. And we don't have a federation. The member states can block, can hinder, cannot implement, and legislations that are really important for Europe are blocked at the moment in the Council.
But you accept that the Council moved to the right, didn't it? To try and beat the populists at his own game. A long way from all the lofty pronouncements about human values.
If you want to let me say that a lot of mistakes have been done, of course. Politics is full of mistakes. But we have been trying with a very strong value-based compass to bring forward a reform agenda based on the rule of law. And the rule of law is the strength of the European Union. And populists want to close borders and raise walls. We want to manage migration, legal, orderly, safe. We want to control and manage the border, not to close the border, combating trafficking, smugglers, illegality, stabilize Africa. That's not easy. To solve Libya, we need unity between France, Italy, and other member states. Member states have to work together.
You talk about the strength of the European Union.
I'm saying in the future, we need to strengthen our common and security foreign policy and speak in one voice. As long as member states are not united, Europe will be weaker.
People are losing faith, though, in the EU. Here's the paradox, isn't it? Highest level of support for membership since 1983. But more than half the people of Europe think the EU is likely to collapse within a generation.
For the first Brexit,
that's also the legacy of the last 5 years, isn't it?
The chaos and implosion that unfortunately we have seen in the UK has been a vaccination rather than infection for the rest of Europe. We have seen...
So you should be stronger as a result of that.
We have seen, if I can finish my sentence, the Eurobarometer, country after country, European Union popularity has increased even in Hungary, with a few exceptions like Czech Republic. And we have seen one after the other, the extreme right political parties dropping the agenda of leaving the European Union and leaving the euro.
So why do citizens have all these doubts?
And while liberals and Greens have gone forward in the elections, they want a stronger Europe, they don't want a weaker Europe.
But why all the doubts about whether the EU can actually stay together? I mean, Spain's foreign minister, Josep Borrell, was asked in an interview if it was so fragile, if Europe was so fragile it could break up. His comment was, honestly, yes. Honestly, yes.
Yes, so Europe has always been growing stark out of big crises. We were born out of the ashes of World War II. And the reality is that it's one of the best places in the world to live. We never had it so good in Europe. We had 2,000 years
you say that,
2,000 years
don't
of
realize
war.
That, do they? Three out of 10 said conflict among countries was a possibility.
It is now, if the nationalist rhetoric continues to put people against people, like Salvini has been doing, attacking the people of Sweden, yes, that's a risk. If you have a weakening of European institutions, together with a high-rising rhetoric, which is not only anti-migrants and anti-Muslims, but also anti-other Europeans, we know when you put nations against nations in Europe, what happens.
And what about its alliance with Hungary?
I was the first one to denounce it. I was the first one to denounce it. I have been taking big fights within my political group. I wrote an article in Political a year and a half ago. I have a
You did,
smear
saying it
campaign.
was time that it stepped up to the
Yes,
plate.
I mean,
but you didn't call for the party to be, Orban's party to be expelled, did you?
I have done it time after time, to be suspended, to be expelled. I took all the battles. And I think that maybe too little too late, but I do admire some of the leaders of the European People's Party who took the courage to take that step. And in the parliament, we have activated the rule of law mechanism, which is asking the Commission and the Member State to take steps towards those countries like Poland, like Hungary, who don't live up to our common values, which is Article 2 of the treaty.
Maria Corazza, Bildt, your party, the European Party, waited and waited and waited and didn't want to do anything about Hungary, did it?
That's true.
For a long time.
And
then what did it do? A slap on the wrist, a wink, a pat on the back, and then they were suspended. Something which Orban himself, Viktor Orban, said was a good decision. The EPP has taken a good decision, he said. It maintained its unity and we can continue a unified campaign. That's all you did, a slap on the wrist,
he says
wasn't
everything
it?
and the contrary everything, because the day before he had said that he would leave the European People's Party if he was suspended, and then he didn't. So his word is not impressing me.
Guy Verhofstadt saw through this, didn't he, the leader of the Liberal MEP group. He said the parties, what the EPP did, was a political trick and a stitch-up that shows the EPP will always put parliamentary numbers ahead of the collective European interest. And he was right, wasn't he?
Well, now I think we have to look at the future. We need politicians
Can
that
you
are...
just answer that? He was right. This was a stitch-up. This was a fudge, wasn't it?
Well, let's
just
see what
suspend. It was the minimum
Let's see what's
do.
happened now. I said it was too little too late, and everybody knows that I've been taking a very strong stand against him, against Marine Le Pen, against Boris Johnson, against Salvini, against Farage. I am not afraid to take debates with those who I think want to adventure the future of Europe and our children instead of build a better Europe.
Isn't it true that the EPP, and it's a diminished party now after the election, has had way too much power for way too long? It's dominated European institutions for the last 15 years. That's got to be unhealthy for any democratic process.
That is for the people of Europe to say, not for you to say.
But that dominance has allowed the party to do what the Financial Times called pre-cooking positions on treaties, bailouts and assorted EU disputes. That certainly stretches the concept of democracy, doesn't it?
Well, Greece is still a member of the euro. Everybody thought that Greece would collapse. Brexit has been a complete failure, which I'm very sorry for the people of the UK, and showed that stability is when you are in the family, and implosion is when you want to leave the family. And the reality is that people want to be more involved, otherwise they wouldn't go to vote as they did.
You criticised Nigel Farage for his views on the EU. You called him the biggest liar in Europe. But when he claimed that the EU was run by a bunch of faceless bureaucrats, there was more than a kernel of truth in that, wasn't there?
Well, he is the elite of the elite, the establishment of the establishment. And
but the point
he has belonged to this elite for a long time. Well, I have been elected twice directly by the people of Sweden for 10 years. I don't feel like I'm a bureaucrat. And together with my 750 elected colleagues, we have 50% of the power in Europe. If that's bureaucrats, and the rest of the 50% of power is elected governments, the same that sit in the capitals and then in Brussels take the decisions. And the European Commission is an executive body, is not a legislator, and they are like the departments in any government in any member state.
Maria Corazza, Bildt, walk down any street in Europe and ask anyone if they've heard of Joseph Daul, the chairman of your European People's Party, who lectures national leaders, some of the most powerful people in Europe, on what they should be doing and why they should be voting. How many European citizens have even heard of this man who wields enormous power within the European Union? They haven't, have they?
I wouldn't go with that criticism.
That's a faceless bureaucrat, isn't he? He's a French beet farmer.
He's an elected politician. He's been the chair. He's the chair of a political group. He's not a bureaucrat, of course. He's a political group. The European People's Party is a political family. It's not a structure.
And he's an enormously powerful figure in Brussels, isn't he?
Well, he's the leader of the biggest political group in the European Union.
Somebody the people of Europe have never heard of.
But the point you're making is very important. And I think it's the lessons that I'm saying, for instance, here in Sweden, we need to continue to take responsibility to make the case for Europe and to connect with citizens. I am a grassroots politician. I have been elected by preferences by the people with a support group of volunteers. I'm not a party politician, so you don't have to convince me. We have a real task, and that's the real most important task ahead of us, to continue to keep the people involved, and much more than we have done little during this election.
Which could have been so much better addressed in the last 5 years.
We are looking ahead on how to make sure that no one is left behind and that people really feel that they are involved, that there is something in it for them in this Europe. There's a difference between some countries where the election campaign has been Brussels, Europe, the great corridors, and here my country, let's diminish the powers, repatriate the powers, less Europe or more Europe. Or the countries like in Germany where the debate has been our common future, our Europe. The future of Germany and the future of Europe go hand in hand. A strong, united and open Europe is the basis for a better Germany.
We are now going to see, in the wake of the European election, what one report called the longest and least transparent job selection process for those who are going to hold the top jobs in the European Union.
Well,
That's not going to be an edifying sight.
I have been in charge in the European Parliament on the legislative and non-legislative work, on the access to public document, or more transparency of the trialogue. So again, you don't have to convince me. I think people have shown in these elections that they want to know what's going on and they don't want closed doors decisions. So anyone who wants to represent them now, I think, has to deliver on this and be more open in the way we take decisions in the European Union.
The mess, one of the messes that was left behind after this last Parliament has been money, hasn't it? Involved lots of money. Money lost, money wasted.
The scandals of
Yes.
the extreme right being funded by Putin?
The reform of MEPs' expenses, for instance.
Of misusing
which you never
European
got.
money, of using the staff of the European Parliament for national purposes. That's all the extreme right in Europe has been doing. That started from Farage and Marine Le Pen and now Strache.
I'm talking about expenses,
They are all
MEPs'
in the hands
expenses.
of...
No receipts, no bills, nothing, no accountability. 40
thing
million
is
euros
that-
worth of European taxpayers' money.
Well, I have been voting for making this more transparent and all this office money, so I have no problem with that. Making in the next mandate, and like my party will do it in the next mandate. But the reason why this has been done is because the people of Europe want less bureaucracy. If you give
They want more honesty, don't they?
Yes, and that's not about honesty, because we are following the rules and the rules are what they are. As long as you don't change the rules, you are not dishonest.
What about the 9 billion that was
You can
lost between
like or not like
2002
the
and
rules.
2017?
You can like or not like the rules, but as long as politicians follow the rules, you cannot accuse them for that. Then you can change the rules if you don't like them. And I'm in favor of changing the rules.
The Court of Auditors accused them of losing between about 9 billion euros between 2002 and 2017, with member states, they said, doing little to prevent or punish those identified as suspects. That's pretty poor, isn't it? Pretty poor example.
Well, we in Sweden here have for maximum accountability when it gets to taxpayers' money, and we are been driving very much a strong agenda to make sure that the cohesion fund, the social development funds, the regional funds, the agricultural funds are used in a way that is effective and go to the end users. And we have been calling the Commission to have more powers to do that. But there is always a balancing act between not wanting more bureaucracy, but wanting more control. More control requires more bureaucracy. That's the way it is.
You're going to miss the European Parliament? Your moderate party here in Sweden dropped you from the list?
I love to be a member of the European Parliament. I'm very grateful for the confidence I got from the people these 10 years, for what I could achieve. Today enters into force a legislation that I've been responsible for, which creates the fifth freedom in the internal market, the freedom of data. That's going to make Europe more competitive, bring jobs, brings...
But you complained that your party had become an old boys network.
Yeah, but let's not talk about
that wasn't true, was it?
Let's talk about Europe. Well, there is a
about you in
problem.
the few seconds we
We
have
need
left.
more stronger Europe, stronger women in Europe, of course, and I hope there will be strong Europe in positions.
Your party list is 50-50,
and
isn't
that's
it?
Yeah, but not in that sense. It means in the sense that strong women need to be appreciated, not weakened.
And you
that's
didn't
true
feel
in
appreciated
Sweden.
by your party.
That's true in Sweden. That's true everywhere in Europe. And I really have been committing myself to making sure there will be more women in leading positions, and there will be more respect for women. There are other forms of Me Too than sexual harassment, which is of course the worst that we have to continue to stand up for. There are other forms of harassment against women in politics and in business.
You're not bitter? You're not bitter about not being on the list?
No.
No?
No, I look forward now. I have so much to give more. I hope that my experience, my networks, my knowledge, my multiculturalism, my being a strong European and devoted, engaged European can be useful in other ways.
Anna Maria Corazza Bildt, thanks for being on
Thank you,
Conflict
Tim.
Zone. Thank you.